Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have returned to work. I have been off for 5 days. Well, technically I've only missed 2 days of work whilst I have been felled by this incorrigible illness. I am feeling like I can actually move about today, which is the whole reason I've come into work. Quite honestly, I don't do well when I'm having to rest, and it was kind of enforced rest. As I said to Charlie, Charlie Brooke Reads, resting makes me restless. As much as I really felt like I couldn't do anything else, it has meant that whilst being stuck either lying in bed or lying on the settee, I've decided to do a massive restructure of the second Ellis Valentine book. You might be thinking, Charlie, I thought you were going to have that edited by the end of June, and you want to know something? I actually was really close to having finished all of the scenes that I wanted written and all the little rewrites I wanted to do on the way that it was. And then as I was lying there with nothing better to do but overthink what was happening in the second book, I thought this scene here would make a fantastic climactic scene, because basically there was something in the middle of it, a cliffhanger between the two chapters that never got resolved really in the original draft. It didn't really work. This character appears but then he's never mentioned again, and I thought, well, the information that he's going to deliver, this other character can deliver in this scene. And suddenly in my mind everything was changing, things were whirring, and I decided to do this massive restructure. So at the moment all that's happened is I've moved all of the chapters to where I think I want them now, and my next thing to do is to go through them chapter by chapter and just do continuity things, you know, things that no longer fit there because we've moved them. I'm hoping that it's going to make for a more climactic end. The way it is at the moment, I wanted it to be a bit softer and a bit quieter, but as much as I like that, I want a bit more drama going into that scene. So that's what I'm hoping this will do. At least, you know, when I was lying there for, I don't know how many hours, I have just been zonked out for days, unable to do anything since Wednesday. So that's not fun. I did, however, read The Whalebone Theatre, which I mentioned in last week's video, and finished that. And because I was feeling poorly, I decided that I'd just start rereading The Lord of the Rings. And honestly, my experience with that book is such a strange one. I remember when the first film came out, there used to be a shopping precinct in Congleton where we'd visit all the time. We used to have to go to the post office in there to collect pensions and that sort of thing. And I saw The Two Towers there. And this was a case of purchasing the sequel before buying the first book, so I had no idea what was happening. I just got this really cheap book, and then I think I saw a school friend with the green paperback edition that had all of the books in, and I asked for that for Christmas, and then I never read it because the font was so small and it terrified me. Until a few years later, my cousin got some that were released, I believe, by Scholastic or Egmont. It was one of the two, where it was all four and they were bound in blue. And I actually managed to read The Hobbit and up until Tom Bombadil in The Fellowship of the Ring, and then never read those. Have no idea what happened to that collection either. Don't know whether I gave it to another cousin who was looking to read it or a friend who wanted to read it. And then decided that it just wasn't for me. I watched the films, The Hobbit, and that trilogy of films is still a favourite trilogy of mine that I go to when I'm feeling poorly. Not this week though. I went to Calendar Girls this week. I'd never seen it before. Fantastic film. Wish I'd watched it 20 years ago. Well, not 20 years ago, I wouldn't have liked it. Listened to the audiobook years ago. Didn't really get into it. I always felt like it was such a dry book. And then a couple of years back I read it, and for whatever reason I just got it. It suited the person who liked reading more slowly and taking more time with books. And then when I started it on Friday or Saturday, I'm still taking my time with it because it's a story I like to languish in, and also because I decided to do this huge massive restructure of Alice. But I just started going through it, and this time around it didn't feel like a chore at all. It didn't feel fast. It felt like revisiting friends. And I thought, sometimes, you know, we know that a book's going to be for us, we just don't know when it's going to be for us. And this time it's proving that I quite like this series in my dotage. I'm reading that, and I'm also still going through The Troubles with Mrs. Montgomery Hurst by Katie Lumsden, which is still a fantastic, funny book that I I'm so enjoying reading. Anyway, I've heard that my manager's messed up the till, and so people could be here soon. So I'll see you when I see you. Today marks the anniversary of my birth. I am now 32 years old. The sun came out to celebrate. It is exceptionally warm, and I'm hoping this means that Sally and I can get out for a nice walk today. It's one thing that people have kept asking me. They kept saying, Charlie, what are you going to be doing with your day? How are you going to celebrate? And as anybody who's been following this channel for any length of time will know, it doesn't really get celebrated in my family. So last year we ended up actually having a somewhat good day by accident. I went out after work and this led into doing a quiz night, and it was just a really pleasant day. But this year, as such, there are no plans. I have kept saying that I wanted to go to Blackpool, but that's an hour's drive away, and I just don't think that I'm in the mood for that today. But I'm sure something will come up and I'll figure it out. Anyway, so far, gifts that have been received are a cheese toastie maker from my manager, which was a complete shock. This is all based on a very small conversation we had about 4 months ago, and 2 books from Charlie of Charlie Brooke Reads, The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan and The Night Alphabet by Joelle Taylor. But I pushed aside reading The Fellowship of the Ring because last week I did start reading The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffman by Angela Carter, and I want to get this done. This book disturbs me, but not necessarily in a good way. There is a surreal aspect where I know that Angela Carter had realised by this point in her career that when it comes to fiction, you can really write anything. And so she decides to be a bit more experimental with where she takes the story. Dr. Hoffman is this dictator who is controlling the populace by making them see things that aren't there. This comes into like a load of sort of different erotic ideas, and our protagonist is retelling this story after the war has ended. There are certain acts of sexual depravity within here that disturb me anyway, due to what's occurring, and they make me uncomfortable, and I think they're supposed to, but it's the way that Angela Carter chooses to discuss anyone from a different race than white that rubs me the wrong way. And I went to check that it wasn't just me like making these assumptions about the author, but it is something that has been noted by a lot more readers than just me. There is this tendency to describe anyone who is not white as though they are barbaric and as though they are not as intellectual as white people. And I know that she regularly describes the protagonist within here as Indian. There's something within the writing that unsettles me, and I don't know whether we're getting an opinion of an author through the text or whether it's supposed to be the opinion of the narrator. It's very difficult for me at the moment to separate the author from the content with this book, and I know that that's an important thing to do within fiction sometimes, and Angela Carter is renowned for making me uncomfortable as a writer. There's something within this novel that hits different than in her other books that have made me uncomfortable. I'll be glad to finish this one, and when I'm done with it, it's probably going to be there as a novel that conflicts me. Whilst there are some great descriptions in here, and there are some moments where it feels like a nightmare, a living nightmare of a novel, there are things going on within here that just make me question the author's intent. Also this week, I'm telling you now, but this will have finished by the time that this video goes up, but I'm running a sale for An Heir to Murder where the book is available for 99p. And that's been going since Sunday. We're now 3 days in and I've not sold a single copy. I'm just like, I can't even give this book away. So it's a bit disheartening. I have been working on the sequel again with this restructure that I talked about, which I was thinking about months ago. I said I wasn't going to do this and then I've gone and done it anyway, but that is just who I am. It's Friday, it's exceptionally warm, so plans to go to the seaside today got thrown out the window because obviously we'd be taking the dog and it's too hot to take the dog outside, which is a shame. But last night I finished reading The Infernal Design Machines of Dr. Hoffman by Angela Carter. I'm still conflicted about this book. I like Angela Carter's descriptions, but for the most part I actually hated this book. I found it a slog to read. It's taken me nearly a week because I was so bored and reticent to pick it up. I didn't DNF it because I've DNF'd so many books this year, but I wish that I had done. I recognised pretty early on that I did not like this book, and then certain acts of depravity were happening and it just felt gratuitous and just put in there for the sake of shocking the reader. There are some violent images. It's a nightmare of a novel. People have dreamscapes. This is just every sort of nightmare you could ever have of a horrific vision is included in this book. Every awful sexual thing that could happen is also in this book. I hate this book. That's all I can say. Absolutely despise it. On a craft level, I can say description-wise, as I said, in terms of the description, it was incredibly visceral and made me feel queasy at times. But in terms of story, in terms of content and plot, I hated it. Sometimes I don't think I need to explain it, actually. I don't think that I need to explain why I hated it, because quite frankly, that's all I can say is that I hated it. Other people love it. Somebody recommended this book to me. Indeed, I only read this because of Ed from Gagging for Lit, because he said he loved this book, but I hate it. So that's where I'll leave things. So today I think that I might start reading the final Elizabeth Taylor that I've got to read. I know that I said I was trying to get Katie's book read, The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hurst. I still hope to do that, especially after hearing some more about this book. She has a great video about the publication journey that I watched last night, and I was just smiling throughout. It's just when you just feel incredibly happy for a person. That's how I felt watching that entire video, so I'm going to link that in the description of this one. Still working on the edits of the second Alice Valentine. The restructuring went well and I'm feeling excited about it. I'm taking it chapter by chapter now and just going through and removing things that no longer fit, or moving things to earlier chapters where I planned for them to go now. I I did eradicate certain plot points, and I'm glad that I did that because I felt like it got more confusing. So yeah, so that's that done. Although we had a read around at the writers group yesterday and I had nothing to read because I've been working on the edits of the novel. And then when I went for coffee with Joy afterwards, we got to talking, and then I was walking home and I couldn't remove this idea from my head. So I came in and I wrote half a page of another story that I don't know whether it's going anywhere. Well, I do know it's going somewhere because there is a novel that I wanted to write for nearly a decade now. I think I've talked about this before, that my nan's auntie was a spiritualist minister, and back in the 1950s, I think it was, they had this column in the local newspaper where they allowed any form of religious leader in the town to write a passage about what their faith means and all that, and they gave it to my nan's auntie. And the following week, a man who was part of the Church of England, or was he Roman Catholic? I can't remember, but he was of another Christian denomination, wrote in slandering my great auntie and calling her a Satanist. And this led to this regular correspondence through the means of the local newspaper. Now, anybody who knew my very mild-mannered, The one thing I always remember about her is just how fragile she seemed, like very, very thin, and yeah, one of those people that when you hug them, you worry that they're going to break in half. She was the person you'd least expect to be a Satanist, is all I'm saying. And I found these letters years ago, and I wanted to write something about it one day. I recently figured out how I was going to do that story, but I've got so many other stories already there. However, one thing that I tend to do when I'm starting a project and trying to find a character is I'll write dialogue between different characters and figure out who they are and how they interact with each other. So it seems that's the stage I'm at, of creating characters. I'm creating dialogue, and through the dialogue I figure out who the characters are. If they have a certain way of speaking, then I'm like, I know what your name is now, I know who you are. And so that's what I did yesterday. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do today with it being too hot to take the dog out.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
It's Sunday, and usually I would round these videos off on Saturday, but yesterday ended up being decidedly busy. Then another book came, and my mother didn't understand that when Charlie Brooke Reeves put the list together of books that I wished for my birthday, it's not a list that I want every single one of the books off that list. It's a list where I give it and I hope that the people will go, find one or two. You know, I'm happy with one. I keep saying, as long as it's thoughtful is what I care more about. I care more about a thoughtful gift than just getting everything off a list. A list of books that I've been thinking about over the last few months or few weeks even. And my mother hadn't understood that, and so just proceeded to just buy them as she could. And so she got me Parade by Rachel Cusk. I have enjoyed a lot of the Rachel Cusk that I've read. I prefer the stuff that she's released more recently than the stuff she released in the past. I still have a long-standing hatred and vitriol towards Saving Agnes, which was her first book. But Arlington Park is one of my favourite pieces of fiction that I've ever read. We'll see how I feel about this, is how I'll end things with that one. But then my mother also decided to get me 2 books from charity shops. Now, these were on my list, and I appreciate getting them, but in terms of A Helping Hand by Celia Dale, I had hoped for a edition that matches my Dawn Books edition. Also, this one's incredibly musty, and so whenever I get too close to it, I'm always like, I'm gonna sneeze in a minute. But part of me is coming around to this vintage cover. What I'm thinking is, I'm gonna read this edition, and if I like it, I'll get the edition that I can actually read, because part of me is also really put off. I don't know whether you can see this on the camera, but the font is incredibly small. It does make me laugh that this edition was apparently released in 1990 and cost $3.99, and I'm looking at it like I would have put this at least 20 years before that, because my goodness, the print is small. Can we just agree that the print is small, please? Can we do that for me and just not tell me that I really need to make that appointment with the opticians that I've been supposed to have made 4 years now. And then she also got me Crampton, Hodnett by Barbara Pym. This book was donated to the charity I work for. Now, I know it was a different branch. Am I ever going to get a Barbara Pym new? Is my entire experience of Barbara Pym just going to be finding them at charity shops? And where was it? An academic question came out of a lavatory. The Sweet Dove died. Well, that was donated to the shop, but I couldn't sell it because, honestly, just my experience with this author. I did see another one at a different charity shop yesterday, but that was so water damaged that I just didn't get it. This whole year has been about me reading the books from my shelves. I knew that I was going to acquire books this week, but there is part of me that is already feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the number of books that have been added to my shelves in the past week. I think that what I'm going to do is focus on the books that were on my shelves prior to my birthday, regardless of whether I want to read them or not. After the disaster that was Friday and just feeling like that day was a waste of my time because it was so warm and I couldn't settle to anything, I discovered that Simply Books in Bramall was doing their reopening. I believe late last year, new owners took over the place and they were doing a reopening yesterday where they just shuffled things around a bit. So I asked my mother to take me. So we got there and there is a fantastic selection of books. I said this myself because I had read most of them. It's the first time I've ever walked into a bookshop and wandered down the shelves and been like, I've read that. Everything I was looking for, I'd read. I might not have owned it, but I'd read it or I got it out of the library. And if I'd read it and liked it, I didn't necessarily feel the need to own it in that moment. This person came across. I'd sent my mum off to the cafe, and I'd been wandering around for about 20 minutes, and there's only 3 shelves. It's like, yeah, there's really, I should be able to find something. And I said to her, well, the problem I've got is that I've read everything here, but I also didn't want to go to this reopening and not buy something. I wanted to support the shop. And he said, oh yeah, well, there's another section upstairs. So I was like, great. And I went upstairs and the first book I saw, I was like, this is fortuitous. So I got Family Lexicon by Natalia Ginzburg. I read The Little Virtues either last year or the year before. And Sarah of Hardcover Hearts was hosting a read-along of Natalia Ginzburg's works. But I wasn't joining in any sort of reading thing at the time, and I'm still not because of trying to get through the books on my shelves and just because I haven't been in the mood for that sort of reading. I just really like Natalia Ginzburg. Natalia Ginzburg wrote her masterful autobiographical novel while living in London in the 1960s. Homesick for her Italian family, she summons them in the celebration of the routines and rituals, in jokes and insults, and above all, the repeated sayings that make up every family. Giuseppe Levi is a Jewish scientist consumed by his work and a mania for hiking. Impatient and intractable, he is constantly at odds with his impressionable and wistful wife, Lydia, yet he cannot be without her. Together they preside over their 5 children in a house filled with argument and activity, books and politics, visitors, friends and famous faces. But as their children grow up, against the backdrop of Mussolini's Italy, the Levi household must become not only a home, but a stronghold against fascism. And this edition was translated by Jenny McPhee with an introduction by Tim Parks. Honestly, it really intrigues me. There are a few Italian novels written during this period and before that deal with the rise of fascism throughout Italy. I read one a few years ago. Was it The Gold Rimmed Spectacles? It is a period of history that I don't know more about. It's something that when the Italian lady and I have our conversations, it's not a topic of Italian history that we ever touch upon. We generally always go pre-1900, and I don't know whether that's just because of what Una Signora experienced, but I'm intrigued by this. I always enjoy a tale of family, and especially when this has come up at a really weird time. I think I discussed in Friday's clip how I had been working on this novel that deals with loads of different people. It came into my head. I've known about this novel for a while. I've wanted to write this almost family style story. So it's just a bit of a coincidence that I picked this up. Maybe I should have guessed with Family Lexicon. I should have guessed with the title, shouldn't I, really? And the next book I discovered quite by accident. I just decided to have another wander downstairs at this bookshop and found the Lost Love Songs of Boysie Singh by Ingrid Persaud. I didn't read this author's first book, but I remember it being quite hyped, the Love After Love one. And then when Charlie and I were creating our list of books that we were going to speculate might be on the book along list, we started discussing this book. I decided to get it when I saw it yesterday. I actually messaged Charlie, and then I saw that the chapters were relatively short, and let's go. This is the tale of 4 women. Popo, brilliant, vulnerable and stuck, she's determined to free herself from the traps of her past. Manalala, a devoted mother, her only connection to her man is their little boy, and she will do anything to keep them both close. For Doris, while he's glorious, and once she's licked him into shape, her husband presents an opportunity to climb the social ladder. She's heard the awful stories, but she's sure they won't be hers. Rosie just wants to mind her business, her lover Etty and her store. 4 lives connected and controlled by one man, the notorious charismatic gangster Boysie Singh. Pull up a chair and let these women tell of the man they believed could love, help or free them, and how some of them survived to tell a tale at all. So yes, the title reminded me of the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. Quite intrigued by this one. It's another hefty one, and as I say, my plan with these books is to use them as a reward for when I've read the rest of the books from my shelves. And I should also say that I ordered Katie's book, The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hurst, from the bookshop as well, because I wanted to support an independent bookshop and wanted to show some support of Katie, and I thought, well, if I draw your attention to the fact that this book exists, you might stock it for more people. Reading wise, I then decided to pick up A Game of Hide and Seek by Elizabeth Taylor. This is the final Elizabeth Taylor novel that I have to read. So far, not a lot has happened, even though I'm 75 pages in. However, I'm at chapter 3. I'm aware that I'm currently at the part where Harriet's a teenager, and at page 130 something when we move into part 2, she's going to be a lot older, and the man who she fell in love with as a teenager is going to come back into her life. It's a weird one reading Elizabeth Taylor books because you never know what she's going to do with the story. You can think you're moving along fine, and she'll be like, yeah, we're going to skip ahead about 20 years now because I'm fed up, which is what I think she's doing in this book. But at the beginning of chapter 3, I was really enjoying the tale of Harriet getting a job at a shop. And I feel like Elizabeth Taylor just captured that scenario perfectly. I really enjoyed the dialogue. I enjoyed the little idiosyncrasies of the characters, the way that they were moving about. There's this woman who's been there since before the new shop owner owned the shop, and she's still incredibly domineering and controlling everyone, even though it's really not her job. And I just love that aspect of this book. And sometimes that's what Elizabeth Taylor does well, is she'll capture characters really perfectly in a vignette that's included in one of her novels. And I believe she did want to draw a light to working class people in her fiction. I just don't know that she always did it in the best fashion, but I did enjoy that snippet. As I have done with most of her books, there is always something, some little bit of dialogue or some small scene where I think she's just managed to capture people to a T. It's just sometimes the rest of the novel isn't as good. I really would like to try and just power through this and read the entire thing today. It's 10 o'clock now. I want to get this video edited and online, but we'll see. I should also say, on Saturday after we went to the bookshop, I then said to my mother, would she like to walk down the towpath with me and Sal, and we'd go to the pub, because it's something we've talked about for ages now, and she's been talking about wanting to go for a walk, and so that's what we did. And we set off, we stopped at the pub, we stayed for a few drinks, came back down, and just as we got home it started raining. Couldn't have timed it better. And then I chose to buy a Chinese takeaway for everybody, which was somewhat more expensive because the place we usually go to was closed for the summer holidays. But the place we ended up getting stuff from, probably some of the best food we'd had in a while from ordering takeaway. So whilst it is not something I'm going to recommend people do all the time, I mean, let's remember, you know, still trying to keep weight down and what have you, and I'm not going to get back into any habits, but for a treat once in a while, well, it has to be a treat once in a while, was darn expensive. And now we're here, and today I want to read that book, and I want to have a lazy day and walk the dog and see what's going to happen, but it's currently looking very overcast out there. There was a nice breeze an hour ago and it was really nice to be stood outside in, but now it's feeling quite stuffy again, but maybe that's just my father's room. Anyway, I've talked for much too long now and I need to go and have a drink. So what I'm going to say is, if you want to talk about anything that I've talked about within this video, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.